So good morning and welcome to you all. And thank you for joining our talk with Martin Jones on starting the conversation about care. And for those of you who don't know me, my name is Sarah Austin and I'm the founder of the Really Helpful Club. I'm delighted to also introduce Caroline Edwards, our events director. Caroline will be chairing the question section a bit later on. Now, for those of you who don't know a Really Helpful Club, I thought it would be helpful to give you some background as to who we are and what our community is all about before we introduce you to our speakers. Our team each come from professional corporate background. I was a senior fund manager in the city, Caroline was a leading barrister, and Rowan and Francesca, who run Really Helpful Club in Surrey, Sussex and Hampshire, both had successful careers in PR. And we've each taken career breaks, and we're now on our journey building this vibrant and fast-growing community together. Now, as some of you will know, Really Helpful Club is an online network that brings together positive and like-minded people to help and to connect one another in our personal and our business lives. And we are founded on an ethos of shared advice, trusted recommendations, and a caring community. And everything that we do is about word of mouth and the power of networks. And this is a high quality community that attracts positive thinking and like-minded people whose recommendations you can rely on. People that you can trust. And it's free to be a member. And with over 15,000 members, we are buzzing. And with limited everyday human face-to-face contact right now, we all need to rely on virtual contacts, online connections, and a trusted community. We are coming into our own. And since the first lockdown, we have moved our highly successful events program online, and we have an exciting lineup of events in the coming weeks and months. And this has allowed us to extend our reach. And in this vein, there has been so much demand to join our network that we've been launched into Surrey, Sussex and Hampshire with our dedicated team based there. And the response has been extraordinary. And we have got so many exciting things planned in the coming months. So please make sure you visit the website regularly, look out for our newsletters, and be sure to contact Caroline about our events programme. Now, healthier lifestyles and better medical care are helping towards increased life expectancy. And whilst this is good news, the growing pressures on the NHS and the social care services, as well as ourselves, cannot be ignored. And it's created a sandwich generation, those of us with older relatives to care for and other family members to support. And it's vital that we should all be aware of the issues and what we can each do to plan ahead and to live our lives to the full. And for many families, it's very difficult to raise the topic of care. It can mean a loss of independence on the part of the parent or the family member, and it represents a change and a shift in one's relationship with one's parent. And we're so pleased to be joined by Martin Jones, who's the Chief Exec of Home Instead Senior Care UK. And our thanks to you, Martin, for so kindly supporting today's talk. Now, for those of you who are not familiar with Home Instead, it's a global franchise network. The UK operation was established 15 years ago, and in this time has grown considerably to over 225 offices with 10,000 caregivers looking after 17,000 elderly clients and delivering over 8 million hours of care in 2020. And as a national home care provider, it specialises in providing person-centred care and companionship in the home for older people. It also delivers specialist dementia care, plus living care, end of life and respite care. And alongside his passion to support families to enable their loved ones to live independently at home, Martin is dedicated to providing job opportunities that are fulfilling and which makes the best use of people's skills and their experience. Martin is also an active member of the Business in the Community's Age at Work leadership team, and he champions the role of older workers. He's also the trustee on the board of the Care Workers charity, which exists to support the welfare of current, former, and retired workers. And in 2019, Martin was named a trustee to the Silverline board by Dame Esther Ranson, who is the charity's president and founder. And as chair of the Silverline, Martin was then co-opted to the Age UK Board of Trustees last year when the two charities merged. He brings his extensive experience in the home care sector to help advise senior directors in running Age UK and working with them and the other trustees to highlight just the important issues affecting how older people are able to live with their lives and to campaign for and ensure that the voice of the older generation is heard. We're thrilled to have you, Martin. And you're here to share your insights and knowledge of care sector and also to raise awareness about the challenges and solutions that we're all facing as society and as individuals and families who each have loved ones to care for and to consider. Now, just a little bit of housekeeping before we move into the next.
Hang on.
Oh, Caroline, can you just... Now, I'll just begin that bit, just a bit of housekeeping and guidance about format and timings. Now, rather than invite Martin to deliver a presentation, we want today to be much more informal than that. We're going to begin with a short video, then followed by my interview with Martin, and then we'll open it up to questions and we'll finish by 12. Now, as we've already said, if you have any questions, pop them into the chat box. You can then direct these privately to the panelists or to everyone. And please do ask any question. This is a safe and a supportive space. Today is relaxed and highly informative, and we promise you no question is off the table. You can guarantee that someone else in the room is dying to ask that same question. So go ahead, be brave, and just do it. This is for you, about you, and for your family. Now, it's a Zoom call, which means it is relaxed. You can have your video on, or if you prefer not to be visible to the rest of the room, then please do turn your video off. We will keep you on mute for the majority of the call, and that will cut out any background noise. And if you do have any comments, please pop them into the chat box. There's nothing better than doing something like this than knowing that people are engaged in the conversation, and even if it's just to say that you're enjoying the talk. Now, finally, we will be delighted to send you a recording of today's talk, but this is on the proviso that we register everyone as members of Really Help the Club if you're not already a member. And that just means that we can stay in touch with you and you'll receive our newsletters. And of course, as you will know, you can always unsubscribe if you wish to do so. And if you do not wish to be subscribed, then please send an email directly to Caroline. Now, with that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and I'm going to invite Diana Stevenson to share a video for you.
But we need to talk about something important. This house, I always thought it was too big for us. But Margaret wanted a bigger house, and she always got what she wanted. I remember when she would play the piano, she would open up all the windows. No matter where I was, I could hear what she was playing.
Dad, listen.
She would... What was I just talking about?
About the house, Dad.
Oh, that's right. I woke up every morning to the smell of bacon sizzling, and the third stair always creaked. And your mother told me all her life that I should fix it. And all her life I said I will. Well, there's something that Margaret didn't know. When I reached that same stair, I'd see her tiny little feet running around the kitchen. And although I knew she'd be there, every time before I saw her, there was a small fist in my chest, thinking, what if she's not? Until I saw those little feet again. Every day from the third stair. I am just glad I never fixed it. Because that's home.
You don't need to go anywhere, Dad. This is your home. Dad, meet Christine. She's going to help you around the house.
Hi.
Hi. The best home to be in is your own. From personal care and memory care to help around the house, Home Instead offers personalised in-home services for your loved ones. Home Instead Senior Care. To us, it's personal.
Dad.
So I've just got to come off out of YouTube and then it won't play anything else and I'll stop sharing. There you go, back to you.
Dana, thank you very much for sharing that. And Martin, if I could invite you to unmute. Thank you very much for joining us. I know you're incredibly busy at the moment, so thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule. Now, Martin, if I could begin by asking you, the last few months have been incredibly stressful for families at so many levels, and the pandemic's really highlighted the significant changes and challenges that are facing us for social care and the health sector in the UK. And as a care provider, a business owner, an employer too, perhaps you could talk to us about how the care sector's changed during COVID and what are some of the challenges that you've had to face. And I guess what's different to what you were doing 10 months ago.
Well, morning everyone, and thank you firstly to Sarah and Caroline for inviting me on this morning to have this conversation about care. And that's a great question to start off this morning, Sarah. So in terms of the business, I'm obviously looking after our elderly clients. From 10 months ago, it changed the start of the pandemic in the sense of the complexity in terms of the regulations change and how we support our clients, the amount of obviously increased PPE our caregivers had to wear to go in to our client's home to ensure the correct protocols are in place. And obviously, if you remember back in March, there was a big challenge around that supply chain in itself. So, you know, we had to be nimble and actually source our own PPE at the same time. I think alongside that, there was obviously the well-being of our clients. We saw increased loneliness and isolation, and that's so, you know, we had to put in extra care with some of our caregivers. And then to support our caregivers as well, we introduced even more well-being sessions. We started to move a lot of our training online, which we were doing, but probably what COVID did was push that further forward than it had done before. It accelerated that process. And, you know, you'll never beat that one-to-one in classroom training, but the hybrid blended approach now that's going to happen is going to continue. Is going to continue for the future. And then as a business owner, I mean, running a business is a lonely place, and it's even lonelier because I'm very much, you know, in Homestead Senior Care, towards his personal is our strapline, and that's what we're all about. It's that personal experience, it's that personal touch and feel, both our clients, our caregivers, and obviously everyone who works with us. I think so we're all missing that personal experience. So it's how to leverage the online platform like we're all doing today, which 10 months down the line feels a lot more comfortable and familiar. But at the very start of the pandemic, it was very different, and to keep the network of over 220 offices online, communicated and motivated in difficult times. So we had to put a lot of support and well-being support and fun at times to keep them going. And the team internally as well, we do our virtual, we call it a virtual huddle every day. So every morning at 9 o'clock, all the team gets on the call. We have a conversation, and through the pandemic, we had a daily song, and through the Christmas period, we had a daily carol. Everyone, different people think. So it's those sort of things. You've got to find inspiration, and I'm blessed that, you know, the business I work with and manage, we've got loads of inspiration to share in terms of our clients and our caregivers, and that, you know, and it's really hanging on to the positivity, because there's been a lot of negativity over the last 10 months, and we're unfortunately still in it. But it's finding those good news stories to latch onto and to focus on in these difficult times. But I think the big thing that's changed is around technology and how we support our clients, how we support our caregivers, and how I support the internal team. That's been on fast forward over these last few months, which is a positive in such a challenging time.
Thank you so much for that. And it's interesting because we talk to so many different business owners across different sectors, and that move to virtual, the acceleration of that trend, I think, is just apparent across every sector. And you should be applauded for the way that you've pivoted and supported your clients, you know, in that way. And Martin, there's been so much talk about reform now for years in the social care funding, and also, you know, the potential for moving to a joined up policy with the healthcare sector. And I guess the pandemic just shines the spotlight even more on that. How do you envisage the way that we look after older generation in the future?
Yeah, that's an important question, because we've always had a Department for Health and Social Care. That's never changed. So from a theory perspective, the NHS and social care should actually be joined up. And unfortunately, it probably never has been. And you're right, over the last few months, what the pandemic has done is shine a light on the importance of social care in terms of, not just in terms of home care and also care homes, in terms of the important role that plays within our society. And I think, you know, going forward, speaking to Helen Waitley, and I've spoken to Matt Hancock, is that there is going to be, there is a policy in terms of government policy, we're looking at social care, but there is a societal truth that we need to all grasp, that how we look after our aging population, support our aging population, and how we fund that has to change going forward. You know, we can't keep on doing what we've always done. And I think that's going to be a difficult nettle for the government to grasp, or for any government to grasp. And they have been working behind the scenes. So I think there's been a lot of conversations over the last few months about how we can leverage and enable health and social care to work better and more freely together. So, for example, there's a lot of movement now in terms of the GPs and getting them a lot more lined up with social care, because NHS is really focused on a sticking plaster. It's really focused, you've got some sort of injury, you've got some sort of illness, let's fix it. And it's great, it does a really good job. But what it's not so good at is in terms of that preventative approach. And that's where community care, social care really can come into the mix in terms of, and you get them both together, that's where the absolute magic can happen. So you have less people needing the fix, so therefore freeing up hospital beds, freeing up hospital readmissions, and more community care in the society and social care. Actually, we're helping, supporting people with the well-being and looking after them either in their own homes or in some sort of assisted living facility. So there's a lot of talk, and obviously the great thing I saw over the last few months is that social care started to be talked about, and more importantly than that, care workers and key players started to really get the recognition they deserve. I think that's really important. But there has been a double-edged sword in terms of, there had been some age bias starting to creep back in because of, and this is what we've started to see recently in terms of COVID-19, and, it only affects the old, and that's where there's been a big push by the government. Well, actually, it just doesn't. It affects everybody. Anyone can get seriously ill with COVID-19, and that's why it's everyone in society to help each other and not polarize whether you're young or old or middle-aged. It doesn't matter. we've got to start working together. So that's another positive. So, but there is movement of bringing both health and social care together and work more freely together, and probably use some of the funding in terms of that's gone to the NHS, actually redistribute more actually into the community as well. That's been looked at, and there's some great examples in what Andy Burnham's doing in Manchester as well, where that's already started to happen, and some great trials. So I think we'll see some sort of change of approach, whether it be a white paper or not that keeps on getting kicked down the road, I don't know. But I know people are being brought back in, like Camilla Cavendish, in terms to help and support the government to really think of a long-term plan, because it's not a 4-10-year plan. We need to start looking 20, 30 years out now to get this in place for the long-term future of our elderly population.
Thank you, Martin. That's absolutely fascinating. Now, please do pop any questions you have in the chat box. I know you'll have lots of things you want to ask Martin, so please do look at the chat box, which is the bottom of your screen. If there's anything you want to ask, do pop that, and Caroline will collate that as we go along. Martin, I've heard you talk so many times now about care and your reason for going into the care sector. It's just infectious, the passion that you have for what you do. It's almost as if it's a vocation that brought you in. Perhaps you could share with everyone what did bring you into the sector and why it means so much to you. Yeah,
in my journey to this sector, I didn't come from the social care sector. I've been in the social care sector now for 9.5 years. And I was in the retail commercial sector. I had a successful career running different retail businesses. But unfortunately, my father in about 2009-10 had prostate cancer. And towards the end of 2010, I became my dad's main carer. And that really opened my eyes in terms of what actually poor support, poor care is out there, in terms of, I really wanted to ensure that my dad stayed at home and for as long as he possibly could. And when I was looking for some sort of support, whether it be a care home or whether it be home care, whatever, I was in a sense of confusion. I was in a sense of panic, and I didn't know where to look. If only I knew now what I know now, and I could answer then, it would make a massive difference. But unfortunately, my dad ended up in a hospice. Now, the hospice delivered fantastic care, wonderful care from my father. But he wanted to pass away at home, and I never forget there was an instance where the doctor just sat with my dad and he said, Ken, unfortunately, you're not going to be able to go home. We can't find that wraparound provider support to enable you to do that. 24 hours later, he passed, and that's my biggest regret. That changes you. And since that time, and I'd set up my own business previously, so to enable me to be my main dad's carer. I'd given up my job. I'd set up my own business, so I could have the flexibility to be that family caregiver. And when I heard that, and unfortunately, Dad did pass within 24 hours, I really thought, I don't want to do what I've always done. I don't want to go back and just work for profit. And I'm really focused. I want to use my skills, my experience, and my knowledge, and see whether those are transferable to a different business. And came across Home Instead Senior Care, and the rest is history. And my business, it's a mission-driven business. It's about, we want to become the UK's most admired care company through changing the face of aging. I talk about changing the face of aging all the time, and that's why I spend, I'm on the Age UK board and Silverline and the Care Workers Chat and those sort of things, because it's really, really important to change people's perceptions, to change people's, options in terms of how they can look after a loved one, because, there is some great solutions out there to enable people to live well in their own home. So that was my passion, and as I say, through a terrible experience, come out where I am now. So it did shape, in terms of my thoughts and my passion around what I do every single day. And every single day, even though we have got very big business now, it's still all about the client. You know, we won the Queen's Award for Innovation. That was really in 2016, and that was all about the way we focus on our clients and the outcomes, and to enhance the care we offer. And you know, it's a great business and very rewarding.
Thank you very much. And I think those values absolutely transfer right across the business. I know we've got Claire Jeffries on the call, who runs Home Instead Wimbledon and Kingston. And I've heard her talk many times as well about her reasons for entering the care sector. And they're similar. It's highly vocational, and it is all about the personal and all about the focus on the client and taking care of the older generation. So thank you, Martin, for sharing that. Now, I think for all of us, it's an incredibly difficult subject, care. How do you raise that topic within your family? And I think we all tend to put off the tricky conversations in life. And with this one, it's easy. It's because it represents, you know, a change, a shift in the relationship you have with a parent or with another family member. And I guess perhaps you could share with everyone your advice for how do you begin to raise those difficult and often very tricky conversations?
Yeah, it's probably one of the most difficult conversations you'll have with, and I wish, you know, looking back again, I'd had that conversation with my father before my father, you know, got quite ill towards the end. And it's that blurred responsibility in terms of, well, where does it sit? And I think the other thing is, I'll use this analogy. It might seem a bit strange, but I'll explain it. Growing old is a bit like putting on weight sometimes, that you know it's happening in front of you, but you can't quite see it. And also your best friend can see you, you know, your stomach may be getting a bit bigger, but doesn't want to have that conversation with you as well. So it's one of those difficult conversations. And there was a great phrase I saw yesterday that somebody else used, so I'm actually going to steal it. And they called it an elderoscopy. So kind of probing in terms of those having those probing conversations about your parents' health, and that will really help in terms of your own well-being as well. So it's got to be approached in a sensitive manner. It's got to be approached, and it's not going to be a sit-down conversation. Well, let's have a conversation about this. It's got to be done over a period of time, and it's about being responsive to those little changes in behavior that you'll see with your mum, your dad, or whoever, and handling it over a period of time. And it's really thinking about, well, how can I support, you know, one of my, you know, a loved one, in terms of, you know, their long-term journey, and how can, you know, what does that future look like, and what do they want? You know, don't impose your views on on them, because you know, everyone's a person, and I think sometimes we think differently. So listen, you know, and react, and be responsive, and you know, use what we're given in terms of the ears and the side of the head, in terms of what they want and where they and how they want to grow old as well, because you know, it's going to keep on changing and evolving, and what's good for one person you may hear of doesn't necessarily fit for the next person. So it's about being very, very sensitive, and appreciative and responsive in terms of their needs and their wants. It's not about pushing what you want necessarily on somebody else.
Very important. Thank you for that. And what are some of the signs that one should look for in one's parents that something may be changing? And what are the things that signify that perhaps it is worth thinking about that next step, whatever that next step should or could be?
That's quite a difficult question to answer, really, because you know, there's, you know, there might be some very easy things in terms of physical things that, you know, in terms of struggling to get up and downstairs, those sort of natural things that they're taking longer to understand, maybe a bit forgetful, you know, but also, as I say, just listening to their responses to people in terms of having those conversations with them. So it's going to be numerous. It's pebbles on a beach. there isn't necessarily one pebble that'll, but there's loads of different ones. And I think it's just really being aware of, how someone is going to change in terms of, and evolve the better as they age. My father, for example, it was really about, I noticed that he was really struggling. My mother had passed, he was struggling to keep the house clean and different things like that, and he was becoming a bit disinterested in actually the meal preparation, things like that. So that's where I did see earlier on, and I did put some support in to help him with those elements. But it's different for different people, and I think if you know the person, you'll be able to see that, just spot those little. And I think we all like to dismiss those things in our head, which we know are quite difficult. It's natural. It's natural. We do it with our children, and we're going to do it with our parents and grandparents. So it's about, okay, just being recognizing them, not necessarily reacting to the first one, but when it becomes a pattern, okay, we need to start to think about this and have a conversation. It could be a simple solution as well. So there could be very simple things you can put in, particularly the physical things, to help and support, as someone ages well in their own home.
Thank you. And I guess when you think about care, everyone immediately jumps to the expense. They may think about expensive care homes, huge expenses involved. And I know, with your hat on as a member of Age UK and the various different bodies that you sit on, you have a really good top-down view of the sector in terms of the costs involved and access to funding. Perhaps you could just sort of simplify how everyone could understand the approach to that and the sort of costs that might be involved.
Yeah, I think you used the word simplify, which is a challenge. Now, this is probably the most challenging aspect in terms of social care or looking after a loved one. There are so many different options, and it varies so much around the country as well in terms of what's available to you. But ultimately, if it's going to be paid for by in terms of the NHS or local authority, there'll be a needs assessment completed in terms of what that looks like. But there are so many different options. So in terms of, obviously the care home option, in terms of which is, I would argue, always, of course, it's more cost effective. It is more cost effective, and you can right from companionship right to end of life. But there are obviously assisted living facilities, and there's obviously care homes, and the funding for the different ones though depends on that needs assessment. But obviously you're in control of that money and where it's spent, or you can do a top up whereby there's a certain element, you get an element of a personal budget, and you'll be able to top up. But it's very difficult. It's very different by country in terms of the 4 nations as well. So there's I would say this, but there's some great advice on the HUK website in terms of how to navigate your way through this. There's some great advice actually on the NHS website as well in terms of how to navigate your way through this. And it will all depend on your background, but really about your needs. That's the first and foremost. Your needs will be assessed in terms of what support, in terms of you're going to get any support from the government, hence the local authority. But that will change, and that needs assessment, I do want to stress this, will change by country, depends what country you live in as well. So there's so many different options out there in terms of living well as you grow old, in terms of in the UK. So it's very hard to simplify it, but there's some great websites to start with that will help you navigate that path going forward.
Thank you, Martin. And as I say, do please pop any questions you have into the chat box. These are really difficult decisions, Martin. And if you do end up making that decision on behalf of the parent, I think something that a lot of people agonize over is, how do you have the confidence to know that you've made the right decision? And I guess the worry about, the last thing you want to do is have to change track. So making that decision and getting it right is immensely important. So perhaps you could share your thoughts on that.
Yeah, and I think the first place to there's two things. Recommendations are always fantastic, and they're always the place to start. In terms of in terms of care homes or care at home or whatever solution you're looking for your loved one. But the obviously is a regulator. So it's CQC for England and the three regulators for the different countries, and they obviously have a grading system, and to make sure that the provider you're looking at has got a good grading background, and you can actually go in, and there's actually quite a detailed report that you can have a look at, and it's not just about care regulations and that's what some of it will be, but there's a lot of feedback from clients in that, so you can have a look at testimonials in that, and also good providers will provide on their websites or when you ring them up testimonials. But the other one to do is pick up the dog and bone and speak to someone. If you're ringing up, they should be responsive. They should be able to answer your questions. If they don't answer the phone or they don't ring you back and things like that, that should really put set some alarm bells off, because that's one of the most important things you want in terms of that responsiveness, in terms of looking after a loved one. So it's the regulator. It's looking at what the latest grading is. It's obviously recommendations, but it's actually pick up the phone and speak to someone, because that person you speak to and then on the phone, obviously they're not going to be providing care to your mum or your dad, but the way they speak, the way they talk, the way they act on the phone, you'll get a sense of culture. You'll get a sense of values quite heavily through that phone call, and that's key critical as well for me. And then the other thing is no one's perfect, and no one makes the right choice for first time every time. So listen to the person who's been provided care for, and speak to the carers that are going in if you possibly can, to find out, and don't leave it till late to make that change as well. I think that's really important. We all make mistakes in terms of providers that we pick, but don't leave it too long as well, I'd say. So keep close in terms of what's going on. There should be a care plan. It should be wrote out. Be able to look at it. It's in the client's home. Have a look what's happening. And they should be interacting with you, and you should be able to see that actually the sense of well-being, the sense of enjoyment, the way they come across, should be uplifted. So notice the behaviours. It's key critical.
Thank you. Very helpful. Thanks for that. Martin, can you talk a bit about powers of attorney and why they're important for each and every one of us?
Well, power of attorney is really simplistic. It's about upholding the decisions you want to make, upholding your wishes. And it should be, a power of attorney should be given to people that you trust to make the right decision. And that may not always be the family members, sometimes. So just think that through. And there are different types of power of attorney. And again, I am going to flag up the Age UK website, because they've done a very simple video on here in terms of how to navigate through this. But there's an ordinary power of attorney that really covers your financial affairs, and is valid in terms of mental capacity, and a lasting power of attorney, which may have to go on for a longer period of time. And it's really passing on, giving somebody else the power to make the right decisions, to uphold your wishes when you haven't got the capacity to make those decisions for yourself. And actually, this isn't just as we get old. We should all be looking at a power of attorney, because it's really important we plan for the future. And again, thinking back to my dad, towards the end that got very difficult in terms of having me and two brothers and my dad's brother, and it all got very confusing in terms of who had the right to make different choices towards, and in terms of what my dad's wishes actually were, because we all had a different view. If that would have been in place, would have made things so much easier, so much less stressful, just for us and for him as well, towards the end. So it's really about that planning element again, which again goes back to one of your previous questions, Sarah, in terms of it's planning ahead. And again, it links into that kind of a difficult conversation.
Absolutely. If you've planned ahead, it's so much easier when you reach that more critical point. Now, we've talked a little bit about the positives of virtual connection, but during the pandemic in particular, scamming has really risen at an alarming rate. And perhaps you can highlight some of the scamming issues that we should be aware of and what we should know about to either prevent them or to how to deal with them.
Yeah, I mean, scamming is the most dreadful. It just preys on people's loneliness. It preys on people's isolations. It preys on people's fears. And, obviously, and it comes in different formats, whether it be the telephone scams, postal scams, or doorstep scams. They're still going on. And obviously the one that now is very, very real is COVID scam, whereby, unfortunately, older people are getting letters and emails saying that about you can get your vaccine for this cost if you click here and all this. So I think that is so wrong. Now there's a lot of hype around in terms of communication, both from Age UK and others, in terms of what to watch out for with that, because it come via an NHS letter. And there's a great website which we'll highlight, Think Jessica, and that was set up by Marilyn Baldwin. And Marilyn Baldwin's mother, unfortunately, had, before she passed away, had over 16,000 letters from one scam organisation over a number of years, and she lost thousands of pounds to this one scammer because they kept on contacting her, kept on targeting her. And of course, when her mother engaged once, replied once, that's it. They never ever let go. So it comes in so many different formats, and I think the thing is, if things are too good, obviously it's usually it's wrong, and you need to, but I think it's been making people aware, and there's a great educational material on the Think Jessica website, which can really help and support everyone in terms of what to look out for. But the latest one that's going around at the moment is this COVID scam that people are sending links out, come and get your vaccination. You will not get a link, you'll get a phone call or a letter with from the NHS, and it won't be via some sort of email, etc. And that's just so shocking. But it's targeting people who are vulnerable. It's targeting people who are lonely and isolated and concerned and worried, and that's ideal for scammers. So we just need to be aware of the people we look after, and make them aware as we possibly can, that that's not the way that they'll be approached for the vaccine. And I think we all saw that dreadful experience whereby a lady actually got a shot in the arm and was charged for it by someone, which was, I think, and gratefully he's been arrested. And again, it never ceases to amaze me how low people can go to target other people who are vulnerable, not just now, but in these circumstances. But it comes in so many different formats. And as I say, Think Jessica is a great website to go to in terms of for help and advice on what to look out for.
Thank you, Martin. That's a really important message. Thanks for that. And just keeping on the theme of technology, you talked a little bit about technology and the role it can play in care and virtual care. What are some of the advances that have already been made, and what do you expect for the future?
I mean, from our perspective, I've always talked about high tech, high touch. Right? Even with COVID, I never foresee totally whereby we have some sort of virtual care or robotic care that will completely replace the person coming in to provide that human experience. However, it can complement it. I think that's what we've seen through COVID-19. So I think there's two aspects. I mentioned it before with our caregivers, that we've had to pivot a lot of our training and support online, and how we recruit quicker online. And that's been really fantastic. And we've delivered over 100,000 different training lessons, if you like, actually online in the last 10 months. So that's been really a fantastic success. And the other one is, in terms, I think we've all seen it in terms of whether it be the iPads or iPhones, in terms of the FaceTime and that social interaction. It's not the same as having the hug and have you been in the same room, but it's as close as. And my mother-in-law, we would speak to her 3, 4, 5 times a week on the phone. Now we FaceTime her every day, and that's what we've done. So, and we've actually enabled, so we've had our caregivers going in, but they've actually enabled us. We've got tablets now with some of our clients, and are able to do FaceTimes with the family members and how it works and how to interact. So that's been an enhancement. And there's other elements in terms of technology, which is unobtrusive, which is really looking at helping, supporting our clients live well in their own home. And that might be elements of Alexa in terms of medication reminders or different subdued sensors around the home. But most importantly, it's not technology that, puts a badge on someone to say that I'm growing old. It's about technology that enhances their experience and is unobtrusive. Because I think there's a great story, and it's actually a true story from Age UK. I mean, they had the pendants, with the red buttons on them in terms of, so when they had to press the red button. But I'll ask you a question, Sarah May. When do you think was the most frequent time that red button was pressed?
Well, I'm going to guess it's at a weekend, and maybe a Saturday night.
Very, very close it was, but it was 7 o'clock Saturday night when Britain's Got Talent, because it's a press your red button and they press the red button because obviously they're interacting what's going on around them. And I think that's, so I'm not really understanding what it's for. And again, that's doing onto somebody else, well, rather than involving them in terms of what great care should look like. So, there's a lot of different technology coming out and to help and support. And most of our goods in new toasters, kettles, fridges, freezer, cookers, they're all Wi-Fi enabled now. So actually things can, as we see it from the Hive system, things are starting to talk, the Ring doorbell, which can really help and support with sensors on to stop people with dementia going in and out of the house or knowing they have. There's a lot of support that we've started to put in there, and that's really pushed it forward in terms of the technology hasn't been pushed forward, but the acceptance of the technology has been pushed forward. I think that's the difference. The technology was always there, but there wasn't the acceptance that we would want it or need it or use it. And that's the mindset shift I think has happened over the last few months, which is one of the few positives.
Yeah, thank you. And really exciting. And actually, I think one of the real positive sides of technology, how it can really bring us, I think, much closer. My final question for you, Martin, before we hand over to the questions that you've all put and Caroline's been collated, is what do you think is the key to a happy old age?
Well, it's interesting. A happy old age is enabling a person to live well in a place that they choose, and to have that sense of, and that it's not a keep on coming, not forcing the decision. So, and if we can enable them to still have their interests and the hobbies and their experiences they had, as long as they possibly can, that's, a happy old age. And you often hear, I think it was, it was on, unfortunately, one of the twins passed yesterday, but there was a couple of twins from 93 and they were on Good Morning Breakfast about 6 months ago, and they were laughing, and Dan Walker was asking, well, what makes a happy old age? What makes you, and they were talking about, we have a tot of whiskey every day and all this sort of thing. And then they had a good laugh about Jason Statham in terms of the actor and, how he could live well with us two, and could he cope and all that sort of thing. I think it's having, it's having those interests and keeping the mind active, but it's really important that you give them that sense of it's don't overtake their life. It's their life, and there's I heard a quote the other day that, the first person that's been born now in the world that's going to live to circa 150. So that means a midlife crisis will be around about 85, 90 buying a Porsche. So that's going to completely change the dynamics in terms of what, you know, in old age potentially, because what is old age? You know, and you've so many, you know, the president of the US yesterday, in terms of there's so many people nowadays that's pushing the boundaries in terms of what is classed as old age. You could have a very old person who's 45 actually, in terms of the frailty and the way they're acting, as opposed to an 85-year-old. So it's about being content and happy in what they want to do.
Martin, thank you very much. It's always a pleasure. Now I'm going to hand over to Caroline, who I think has been busy collating all of your questions. Caroline, are you there?
Yes, I am. Thank you.
Brilliant.
So I'd just first like to say thank you, Martin. You always speak so eloquently on this subject, and you provide a really sensible head when it comes to really difficult decisions that we've all got to make. And this is reflected by the very first comment we had, which is big hats off to all of you for pivoting so effectively. You provide amazing support to so many. Simply thank you. So what a lovely way to start. The next question is, I would like to know what measures you have in place for caregivers so that seniors do not become so emotionally and physically dependent on them that the vulnerable elderly feel so grateful that the family are sidelined in decisions, and even the family are pushed out of their lives and the will without their knowledge. Are there safety measures in your organisation that prevent carers receiving authority and money beyond their normal remuneration and remittance and blocking family contact?
Yes, there is. In terms of, we've got very, very clear policies on obviously that, you know, accepting gifts, etc. That is just a complete no for these obvious reasons. You know, they are, you know, a caregiver is there to support, is not there to replace the family member. It's there to work alongside the family member in terms of to ensuring the loved one lives well in their own home. We have a lot of supervisions that go on with our care managers that go out with our caregivers, or senior caregivers who go out with our caregivers as well. So there's a lot of different processes we put in place to ensure that doesn't happen. And then, you know, there is the, we do an annual survey every year to all our clients, which mostly go out to our clients' families in terms of, you know, what you think of the care, what's going right, what's going wrong. And there should always be elements of, in between that, contact between the office and the clients and the family members to ensure that wraparound care is being offered. So if that is happening at all, in any case, I'd suggest you contact the provider and just have a conversation, because, you know, it's not about Homestead Senior Care replacing the family. You can never replace the family. We can never replace the family. We're there to support, you know, someone to age well in their own home. So that should never happen. So
basically keep the conversation going at all times. Yeah. Ask for regular reports, you know, ask for people to weekly, for example.
Yeah. And there'd be the care plan that be in the family's home, and keep that interactive. Yeah.
Okay, great. I'm interested to know how we can tell between normal forgetfulness for someone around 80 years old and the onset of dementia.
It's a difficult one, because that comes up in different nuances with different clients. So I think there's usually patterns of forgetfulness that we tend to highlight and look for. And we tend to, what we always advise the caregivers to do is just keep a bit of a journal, because I'm forgetful. So, you know, I'm very forgetful. I'm dreadful sometimes. So, you know, so I think but it's not a consistent pattern. So it's keeping that journal of, and it's getting more frequent. So, you know, we're all forgetful at times, but it's a frequency, keeping the journal, just happening certain times. That's probably the best way. And then start to ask, you've got, you know, is the caregiver noticing these elements, or, you know, and again, Age UK, Alzheimer's Society, some great, you know, Dementia UK, some great websites, videos to watch in terms of what are the little things, again, pebbles on a beach, which can compact to be potentially a bigger issue. And the earlier we spot it, the better. And always speak to, can always speak to the local GP, because they have had a lot of training over the last, I'd say, 9 years, certainly the last 5 to 6 years that I've been in social care, in terms of really upskilling the local GP to spot the early onset of dementia a lot more than they used to.
I'm reading an excellent book called Here and Now by Santa Montefiore, which is all about the onset of dementia for a 66-year-old, actually. And it's written from the perspective of the family and how the little things that she does makes them realize that there's a problem. So I would highly recommend that to anybody who just thinks there may be a problem with a family member. It's a really enlightening read, actually. So you mentioned websites, and you mentioned some good websites that are the best to look at when you're deciding about which care to go for. Could you please remind us of the ones that you mentioned?
Well, I'll start off with, obviously there's our website, which is homestead.co.uk, which is also a good start. Age UK is a good fountain of all knowledge in terms of different elements of different levels of support, and they've also got some great helplines that you can ring up and ask for some advice. I think Jessica website, which is very about the scam awareness, which is really important. So I would thoroughly recommend that. The NHS website in terms of social care, and when when you cancel my pay for social care, it kind of goes through the different pathway, if you like, on that. And there are countless others like Independent Age, which is another really good, useful website, and Citizens Advice in terms of the power of attorney element and the financial planning element, very independent, and that will often navigate you through and showcase other websites as well in terms of the best advice. So there's quite a nice mix there in terms of independence. But I'd probably say one of the best ones, but I would say this as a trustee, is Age UK, because he's a font of all knowledge as we age.
Before I ask the next question, if anyone's got a very personal question that they want to ask, but don't want to have it broadcast to everybody, then they can select just ask Caroline Edwards the question, and then I will only see it and I'll ask it on your behalf. So have you any advice on how to guide elderly relatives in their behaviour for in-home care? Sometimes resentment can build and come out in not very kind treatment of the carer. Can the carer feed back directly to the family, and how involved can the family be?
Yeah, I think this is, being open and honest and wearing my heart on my sleeve. My father was terrible as he aged, particularly when he was in the hospice. And what the nurses did there is what the caregivers should do as well, is that they involve the family in terms of my father's behaviour, but they were understanding to a point, but they asked our support in terms of to help and have those conversations with my father, which we did. So yes, again, it's that care that surrounds the client, in terms of it's not just the caregiver, it's the family member, it's the GP, it's the district nurse, it's that whole wraparound support, and that communication again, which we've mentioned before. So yes, they should be involving the family members, giving some examples, and working together to find a solution. So yeah, I think that is really important, and we do come across this quite a bit as well.
I'm sure, especially with dementia patients, they can sometimes become very angry because they're frustrated.
Yeah, it is.
Do you offer staff that can support with small admin tasks, for example, bill paying? It's always worrying to leave unknown people in charge of money matters, but it also helps to free time for families so that they can focus on happy time with their parents rather than on constant admin tasks.
We do, but we're always very, very careful for the reasons you've just said, in terms of So anything, we do have certain clients who are caregivers, and it's usually senior caregivers will help and support on this as well, that supports the family members in terms of paying small bills, etc. So we do this, but it has to be, we've got quite a few policies around, as you can imagine, to protect the client, to protect the caregiver, and to protect the family. So again, it's involved, it's that triangle of trust. We've got the caregiver, the family member, and the client that's really bound in that, to ensure that we do that. And sometimes we've got, some families have set up, I don't know, those small debit cards with a very small amount of money on, that a bit like petty cash, more better phrase, the £20, £30 limit, but can go out and get mum or dad a bit of milk, bit of bread, little things that just to keep the household running. That's what quite a few families have done, and it works really well. They just do top-ups. They're completely in control of what's being spent. That works really well, and it's good for us as well. There's good controls. There has to be good controls for that triangle of trust to really work.
Okay. If a patient is making unsafe decisions and you think it's time to invoke the lasting power of attorney, how far do you do that against their wishes?
Are you talking, that'll all come down to mental capacity, and if they've got the mental capacity to make the right decisions, and there's certain regulations that need to be adhered to on that. That would be something obviously a family member would do, obviously not the care provider, but there's certain quite tight regulations in terms of when that could be invoked, but there are certain thresholds that need to be passed. And again, there's some great advice on Age UK on when those thresholds can and cannot be passed on that one.
Okay. What should we be pushing as an agenda with the government? Caring for elderly relatives or adjusting our life to enable space to care is penalised under our current tax rules. There must be a better way to ensure that your parents can be supported in a way that removes guilt and stress.
Now, that is a great question. And that is a great question. And it's a question that in fairness, that I know that the government are looking at, and I know this is one of Baroness Camilla Cavendish has been brought on board to specifically look at. And it's about, in terms of different options in terms of how we finance our later lives. So, the government, there is some. I've personally been pushing an agenda, one of the agendas I've been pushing in terms of whether there's any tax advantages or rebates in terms of, like the Irish do, in terms of social care. There's also a great solution I've been pushing out there as well, whereby we have the care vouchers to look after our very young, but why can't the care vouchers be look after our aging generation as well? So it's an end-to-end care voucher which helps and supports. So that's been looked at as well. But I think it's giving people the flexibility that one size doesn't fit all, and I think that's where the government is challenged, I suppose, in terms of to find that right formula, in terms where people aren't afraid they're going to lose their homes or aren't getting penalised financially, and as you say, we're all under that moral dilemma in terms of how to look after our loved ones. So there's a lot of different, and that's, so in terms of I'm lobbying for more the care voucher approach in terms of looking at different tax, but also it's about raising people's awareness. We need to start people to start thinking about pensions. We changed a few years ago and it now became enforced. Well, we need to start thinking, well, actually, there's more people living longer than ever before. That's going to double in the next 20 years. So you need to start planning both physically and financially. Well, what does my later life look like? And that conversation needs to start far earlier, in people's lives. And I think that the government is now starting to talk about, do we do some sort of later life agenda, later life planning, in terms of how do I plan for care for later life, like they've done the pensions. So that's kind of the next thing the government are considering with. But as we know, going through a pandemic, there's a lot of challenges for us all and on the public purse at the moment. So there's different alternatives, but I think it's really about, we've all got to take ownership as well in terms of how do we want to age well, and what can we put in place now to enable us to do that, rather than expecting somebody else to do it.
Yes, that's certainly something we've been encouraging. We've done a couple of financial planning events, one with Flora actually, who's on this call, and how important it is to actually plan for later life and not leave it in the hands of your children or the government, the local authority, whoever it may be. Such an important message to get out there. And it's something we need to tell our children, actually. We need to tell the people who are just starting work, start planning now. It seems ridiculous, but they've got to. Especially if we're going to live to 150, what a scary prospect. I certainly don't want to live that long. So there's a lot of focus at the moment on preventing older people going into hospital, especially at the moment with COVID being so rife. What do you do as a home carer to prevent them going into hospital?
I mean, that's really about ensuring that we have the right protocols in place, that and in terms, so we don't take COVID into the home. And it's then in terms of the other illnesses, one for better phrase, in terms of to spot them as soon as we can and actually get remote care in what can be done in a person's home, what can be done in the community, rather than someone actually having to go into hospital. Because unfortunately, if you go into hospital, a bit like anything else, you're more at risk of picking up COVID at the moment. So the safest place to be is your own home. So that's where now a lot of the GPs and what have you now do a lot more online consultations, and a lot more our caregivers are getting involved with that in terms of helping and supporting that take place. We're moving into what we call healthcare at home, so we're moving more into that medical space in terms of measurements, in terms of redressing wounds, etc. That we've been trained by nurses, but and certified, but your caregiver will be able to do. So we're moving more into that space as well. So they don't have to go into hospitals, or they don't have to go into the medical centre to have those things done. I think we'll see more and more community care. I'll call it community care because it's medical, going to increase over the next months and weeks and years. One, because of the cost element, but also because it just makes more sense. Because the thing with care homes and hospitals, you are crowding people into a place whereby infection, unfortunately, will pass around quicker. So the less people in that space, the more constrained you can be, the better protocols that can be followed. And then look at the people, and then they get the care they need and deserve, because it's more difficult, and then keep it a more simpler, easier to support medical conditions done in their own home where possible.
Talking about COVID, we were talking earlier about vaccinations. Are your caregivers in the high priority list for vaccinations?
They're actually, the first priority category, stage 1, was care home residents and care home staff. And then category 2 was social care providers and people over the age of 80, those at risk, and people at the front line, which is our caregivers. I mean, today we've had just shy of 1,500 caregivers vaccinated across the UK. It's so I'm delighted with that. It's working really well. Most of my offices now have been contacted to say, we want a list of our caregivers, and that's been managed through the different regulators. So it's CQC in England. So they've got all listed, all the different providers, and that's the way it's being done in terms of to the actual care providers. And I think the last time I looked, in terms of our clients, we'd had over just shy of 2,000 clients had their first vaccine, and about 350 had the second vaccine. So it is starting to move quite quickly, but that is very different in terms of where you live in the country. And And I think we've just got to be mindful of that in terms of there are some people who are getting vaccinated before who's somebody else down the road who's over 80 who hasn't even had the letter yet. So there is that disparity, but it does seem to be working relatively well so far. So we're category 2. I'm quite pleased with that.
Good news, that's great. You mentioned the requirement for a needs assessment if you're going for funding. Who carries out that assessment, and does the child of the elderly parent have to organise that?
Again, it's a free needs assessment, and that can be requested. It can be requested by the client, or it could be requested by a family member. It's generally requested by a family member, in fairness. But yeah, it's a free assessment, and you can get, and that can be organised. You can go through the portal on the NHS website, or you could go through your local authority portal as well to get that done.
Great. And this is the last question, unless anybody else poses one. Can you tell us a bit more about what home care feels like, what it actually involves? Does it include, for example, full live-in care?
Well, this is a great question. It can involve what you want it to involve to a certain degree, obviously the boundaries. So, we provide care for people who have 1 hour care a week. Maybe take them shopping or take them to local park when we could do these things. So a bit of companionship care, to personal care, right to end of life, and as you say, right to living care, which is actually having a living caregiver. Have that 24 element of support in your house. So it's really, and this is why Home Instead is quite unique. We focus on the person. The most important person is the client. So it's what they want out of that care in their own home. And I go back to my dad. Really, what he wanted was just a bit of companionship. He'd lost my mum and he was very lonely. That was the most important thing for my dad. He wasn't bothered about the cooking, the cleaning, and all those sort of things. He was more interested. Just wanted a bit of support. And that's what actually happened. So that's the most important thing. So it's what the person wants, and it can be anything. So there's a whole spectrum, a suite in terms of, we fit around the needs and wants of the client. So it can be medication reminders and all those other things, but most importantly, it's there to be that relationship for the client, so they've got someone to talk to, someone to have a laugh with. That's the most important thing.
Sounds fantastic, and what a very positive note on which to end. Thank you, Martin. I'll pass back to Sarah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Martin. I've just stopped sharing the slides. Martin, as ever, an informative, thoroughly inspiring talk. Thank you very much. I do hope that everyone has found that helpful and has got a lot out of that. But also thank you to each and every one of you for engaging in the conversation and for all of your questions. I think we covered so many topics, but if you have any further conversations that you'd like to have, any more questions, then we have shared Martin's contact details in the talk. And as I said to you earlier, we will be sending you a recording together with that contact information. So thank you very much indeed. Thank you, Martin. And I would like to just finish by thanking you for attending. Thank you for all of your support, and to you, Martin, as well. And to leave you with this message: find a way to start that conversation. Be informed and plan ahead, as Martin has said. Plan ahead to be able to live life to the full and to support those that you love and those that you care for. Thank you very much indeed. And with that, we're now going to draw it to a close. And so do just leave at your leisure.